Hello and welcome back to R.I.S.E interviews. I am really excited today to be bringing on Anoara, and she's going to be talking to us all about metacognition. We're particularly going to be talking about her book as well, which I had the pleasure of reading and reviewing. So I'm really excited to welcome on Anoara. Welcome, Anoara. How are you?
Hello, Kat. I'm really delighted to be here. Thank you for inviting me on the
Of
show.
course. No,
I'm
it's
very well,
great.
thank you. Really excited to talk to you all about metacognition.
Well, I know it's a big passionate topic for you, obviously, considering the book and everything. But before we dive in, could you just introduce yourself to whoever's listening or will be reading this when it's printed in the magazine?
Yes, so my name is Anoara Mughal. I have been a primary school teacher for about 16 years.
Long time.
I've covered lots of areas of leadership, middle leadership, senior leadership. And now I deliver training sessions to schools, having written the book on metacognition,
Mm.
and help support schools implement it. And I am working on some other exciting projects, which
Oh,
I will discuss later on in the show.
oh, exciting. I look forward to hearing all about that. So obviously we touched on the fact that you've written a book, your
Mm,
Think Metacognition Primary Powered Teaching.
yes,
No, sorry, Metacognition Powered Primary
power
Teaching.
primary
Can
teaching.
you give us a bit of an overview about the book and why you wanted to write it?
Yes, so the book contains 14 chapters, starting off with the importance of research in
Mm.
education and some of the pitfalls as well, and why we need to have more of a nuanced approach when we are reading research around education. And then we journey into what metacognition is and self-regulated learning. And what I've done with the chapters is I've broken them down into the research and then practical strategies that teachers can take away. You know, I understand that teachers are very busy people and they don't always have the time to read the research. So the reason why I wrote the book, that was one of the main reasons why I wrote the book. Um, and the other reason was when the word metacognition became infamous, shall we say,
Yeah.
back in 2018, we all thought that it was a new, um, type of pedagogy that had come out. It was
Yeah, it was
something
kind of
brand new.
introduced like it was a new thing, wasn't it?
It was, it was.
Yeah.
But then uh, I remember going back to my PGCE days and
Mm.
hearing the word. But
Yeah.
then during practice, it was something that was never brought up again or mentioned
Mm.
again. So one of the other reasons why I wrote the book is because um, we all have quite well developed metacognitive skills. But when
Mm.
it comes to teaching, we're not always explicit enough with the
Yeah.
children. So I wanted to enable teachers to see where they are being explicit with it and where
Mm.
it could be further developed.
Mm.
Um, and the chapters are organized so that it allows you to be quite reflective, not only from a pupil's point of view, but your own point of view as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I can definitely see that. And I see what you mean as well about kind of, yeah, teachers don't have time to do the research.
No.
And you've got a very thoroughly researched book there, but you've taken out all the key concepts, obviously, they need to know, and then the practical strategies. So I did think how when you read through it, you do really build on that knowledge and
Mm,
confidence, which is obviously what a teacher will want to be able to take away from it.
absolutely.
So, how would you define metacognition? Because I've heard it kind of catchphrase as thinking about thinking, which is like,
Mm.
it's just not very helpful. And I know in the book you had some really lovely ways of describing it. So it kind of made a lot more sense and was very clear.
Mm.
What would be your way of describing it?
I think for something like metacognition, it's important to look at it from with different lenses. So I would look at the word first, break the word down. So you have the two parts, the meta and the cognition. So the meta means after or beyond, and that would normally signify an alteration or change.
Mm-hmm.
And then the word cognition, which is the knowledge and understanding of our learning processes or thinking processes
Mm.
through knowledge, senses, and our experiences. So I think
Mm.
it's important to break down the definition of the word first,
Yeah.
then look at metacognition as a whole. So it's divided into two parts. So you have the metacognitive knowledge and the
Mm-hmm.
metacognitive strategies. So the metacognitive knowledge metacognitive knowledge and metacognitive skills. They're
Mm.
the two parts to metacognition.
Yeah.
So the metacognitive knowledge has three key elements,
Mm-hmm.
which are the declarative knowledge, so knowledge of ourselves as learners. Then you have the procedural knowledge, so the knowledge of procedures such as retrieval practice,
Mm-hmm.
etc. And then conditional knowledge, which is when and why we use the strategies.
Yeah.
When we move on to the metacognitive skills, that can be divided into three parts, which is the planning,
Mm.
um, which involves the goal setting, and then we have the monitoring. So that's almost kind of like the self-testing part of it. So how am
Mm.
I getting along with this task? What else do I need to do? Are there any other strategies that I can use? And then you have the evaluating phase, which is appraising the outcome and how successful you've been. There are other ways of looking at it. So I quite like the idea of metacognition being a bridge. So
Okay.
a bridge um, from self-concept
Mm.
to self-efficacy. So self-concept being um, looking to the past and then comparing it with future learning.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Another way I like to use the bridge is I like to think of metacognition as being the bridge from knowledge to critical thinking.
Mm.
And it is that critical thinking and problem solving
Yeah.
that also helps memory development. And in the book, I call it the thinking gap,
Mm.
um,
Yeah, that's nice. I
which
like that.
I think is almost kind of like the missing puzzle
Mm.
to us as being effective learners and being successful in that.
Mm. No, thank you. That makes a lot of sense, Anwar. I think you really kind of clarified lots of the different areas and showed it's a lot more complex than just thinking about thinking. So,
Absolutely.
I just wanted to go back to, I mean, it says it in your title really that it's for primary teaching.
Mhm.
Why in particular were you passionate about the development of metacognitive strategies with primary pupils?
Um, One of the reasons why I'm really passionate about it is because I have seen metacognitive skills and strategies being used by 3 and 4 year olds
Mm.
in my experience. And if you walk into a nursery school, for example, you might notice children who they might be completing an activity and they don't give up until they've been successful in it. They seem to be aware of what the goals are.
Mm.
Maybe they've been motivated by seeing a person do that before. Um, and somehow they have that metacognitive knowledge of, oh, if I practice this, I could become
Mm.
better at this. Even though they don't verbalize it, you can see it in action. Another reason why I think it's really important in primary school is because I've taught in many challenging schools throughout my
Mm.
career, and I've gone in and, I've very quickly noticed the children who I call them novice learners.
Mm.
So I call people novice learners and experienced learners.
Yeah.
And at some point in our lives, we will become novice learners, particularly if it's something, a new skill or new knowledge that we are
Mm.
learning. So I think it's really, really important to develop those skills at primary, because the novice learners are your learners who also need to learn about self-regulation,
Mm.
which some researchers say that self-regulation happens as a result of teaching metacognitive skills,
Mm,
but other researchers say it's the other way around. In my experience, when I've taught metacognition explicitly, I have noticed children becoming more
mm,
self-regulated in their learning. So I tend to go with the first idea of that self-regulation can be
mm,
developed through metacognition. And it's important to think about motivation in all of that as well. So the three strands are cognition, metacognition, and motivation. And I find that when you teach metacognition explicitly, it can
mm,
be highly motivating to pupils.
mm,
Um, so because I've used it with a lot of success, I really do think it's important to be taught at primary. I've had
mm.
pupils come back after leaving year six and saying, "Oh, Mrs. McGill, thank you so much for teaching me. You know, I'm continuing with what you taught me, and I'm doing so well at secondary school."
Oh,
And it's so
that's
lovely to hear
brilliant.
that.
Yeah. I guess it's like a lot of things, though, that the younger you learn it, obviously, the more time it has to develop and the more experience you're becoming it. So, kind of taking those skills on early on is only going to benefit them in future.
Absolutely. And I think it's important at primary school to develop that love of learning
Mm,
and also to see children as learners. I think we do need to be quite careful about the language that we use
mm,
and helping them to see that, yes, they can be successful. It doesn't matter what their age is, what their
mm,
background is, where they come from, um, whether they've successfully passed a test or not. There
mm.
are other ways of being successful. It's not just
Yeah.
about testing. So, if you think about a child who, I don't know, maybe couldn't sit still and concentrate for
Mm,
5 minutes, if they're able to do that, by the end of the year, that is successful learning.
yeah, exactly.
So I think it's about being clear about what success is and what it looks like.
Hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. So within the book, you've got a lot of different metacognitive strategies. Obviously, we won't want to spoil them all so people read the book, but what are some of your personal favourites?
So some of my personal favorites are, um, I think I wrote an article for you as well. No, I think I did write an article for you.
Oh,
Um,
yes, you did. You did write an
I
article
did,
for
I
R.I.S.E, so
did.
we'll link that in as well.
Yeah. Um, yes. So I've I over the last few years, I've been developing kind of like a toolkit for teachers. So something that they can print off and they can try out in their classroom. So my
Oh, teachers do
favorite
love a
one,
printable one.
yes. So or you can display it on your whiteboard.
Yeah,
So my
exactly.
favorite one is the success strip, um, where I have the three key questions on there. Have I been successful? What went well? What will I do next time? And I love that one because you get some really, really funny answers on that.
Oh, I can
And
imagine.
and children are so truthful and honest.
Mm,
And I remember having one where a couple of my pupils wrote down, "No, I haven't been successful
mm.
because I was talking too much." And next,
Well, at least they're honest about that, and that
oh
maybe it
no,
wasn't the
that's
best
the thing.
behaviour for learning.
But what's really good about that is they are naturally goal setting for the next
Mm,
lesson. They know what they need to improve. I don't need to tell them off. I don't need
no.
to tell them. They know what they need to do,
Mm,
and they did it in the next lesson. So I love that one.
I like the
Um,
simplicity of that one as well.
yes. And the other one that I like is the then and now, then,
Mm,
that I wrote about as well, because um, particularly at primary, there's so much going on.
mm,
Pupils can't always clearly see that they have been successful or they've made
yeah.
progress. So I like to use that one. So I'll dig out their books from September, compare them in spring,
Mm,
um, and I'll compare like for like, and I'll ask them
mm,
to jot down the elements that they could see from their work in September and then
Mm,
compare them to spring. And immediately it'll be like, oh, yes, I can see
mm,
that, for example, my handwriting has improved, or I'm now beginning to use fronted adverbials, whereas before I couldn't, or whatever the
mm,
skill is,
yeah.
they can then visually see it.
Mm,
And that they find highly motivating as well.
yeah, that's a good point. I think sometimes they don't really get the time to go back through their books as well and look at their old works. They're kind of encouraged to be like, right, next clean page, get on with your work. And they
Exactly.
miss that opportunity to see that progress, don't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that was both of those. I would say were really great strategies. Um, what about, I mean, I like that you had quite a lot about this in your book actually, but what are some of the key misconceptions when it comes to metacognition?
So one of the key ones is that metacognition is something that can only be developed in older people, and not children.
Mm,
But I would say that it is clear that the skills and strategies can be taught,
yeah.
to younger children. Another one is that metacognition is a general skill that should be taught separate to um, cognitive skills, but it is something that needs to be taught alongside. And the key factor in that is that the task has to be challenging enough
Mm,
in order to develop the reflective thought processes.
yeah.
Um, that's another one. Another one is that some people think that metacognition can't be taught,
Mm,
which I
that's
find
interesting.
really, really,
Yeah.
really interesting.
Mm,
So I'm not quite sure where that comes from. We can always become a little bit more reflective.
mm,
Um, we can always question ourselves. Am I on the right track? So
yeah.
I'm not sure where that came from, but I would say that it can be taught.
Mm,
Um, Maybe they were referring to, the skill of retrieval practice.
hmm.
That is normally something in primary school that teachers would need to plan,
Yeah.
as opposed to pupils being independently being able
Mm,
to do that. Because at primary school, pupils wouldn't naturally think, oh, let me test myself on this again.
yes. Yeah, of
Have I
course.
improved? So maybe that's where that
Maybe
has
it's more
come
that.
from.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting because I mean, yeah, I think it definitely can be taught, especially based on what I've read and seen in the classroom as well.
Mhm.
So, kind of feeding off of misconceptions, then, what are some of the let me start that again. Feeding off the misconceptions, what are some of the challenges that teachers might face when explicitly teaching metacognition?
So, in my experience, one of the challenges that I've had is sometimes, particularly when you go to start a new school, for example, for one reason or another, some pupils, and I think this depends on more the pupil's belief as
Mm,
opposed to anything else. Some pupils don't readily accept feedback,
yeah.
and challenge, and that can be a great big barrier
Mm,
to developing metacognitive thinking. They see it as something bad, and they
mm,
associate it with bad feelings. Um, so that can be a huge challenge.
mm,
So the first thing that would need to be done there is to slowly take your time in developing um, that acceptance, and
mm,
getting pupils not to see it as a criticism.
it's changing the perception, isn't it, of what it
Yes, and
is?
changing that mindset, and it does
Mm,
link to the growth mindset. So pupils who are in that kind of negative self-talk mode, they're the ones that will find it a challenge to take on feedback.
mm,
Another challenge is, and I'm guilty of this, as I'm sure you are, is
yeah.
trying to implement too many strategies at once.
Yeah.
Um, so we are teachers, we get excited about new things all the
Mhm.
time. So I would say really take your time
Mm.
and embed one metacognitive strategy at a
Yeah.
time. Um, Another one is when it comes to learning, if it's new learning, metacognition should not be taught alongside new learning
Okay.
because there'll be cognitive overload.
Mhm.
So it's always best to teach metacognitive strategies once they've encountered, sorry, let me start that again. It's better to teach metacognitive skills and strategies um, with learning that has already been embedded,
Mhm. Yeah.
if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. So you wouldn't just kind of be teaching a completely new concept and trying to do metacognitive skills at the
Yes,
same
at
time.
the
You want
same
them to have a
time.
good understanding of the learning first.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. So, what would be your top tips for a teacher in supporting pupils in being able to understand what metacognition is and also why it would be helpful for them?
So I would always start off with teaching them what the growth mindset is
Hmm.
first, um, because the concepts underpinning the growth mindset are easier for pupils to understand
Yeah.
before going into metacognition, and then teaching them how the growth mindset concepts relate to metacognition,
Mm,
because metacognition is a big word, and as we've
mm,
seen the many different definitions of it,
yeah.
it can be a challenge for young pupils to understand.
Mm,
So starting off with the growth mindset um, would be the better approach.
mm. Yeah, something more kind of easy for them to grasp initially.
Mhm.
It makes sense. It's quite a popular teaching in schools anyway, so I can imagine it
Yes.
would work quite well to kind of lead on from there.
Yeah.
Okay, I have to ask you now. You see, you said earlier you're working on exciting projects. So, what is next for Anoara?
Well, I've got a new website that I will
Well,
be
that's always good.
launching very soon. And it's going to contain courses on metacognition.
Oh,
There'll be
brilliant.
lots of free
Hmm.
resources. I'm going back to blogging again, so I'll have some brand new blogs on the
Hmm.
website. It will be a way of people being able to contact me as well.
Mm,
So it's going to have a brand new look and everything. Um,
brilliant.
and then I'm working on possibly writing some more books.
Oh, that would be brilliant. I'd love
So yes,
that.
so that's in the pipeline. I
Hmm.
am collaborating with someone at the moment, but I'm not allowed to say
Fantastic.
what's going on.
No, yeah, of course.
And then I'm actually working with a business software startup company.
Okay, that's
So
interesting.
advising them on their training needs. So that's
Hmm.
really exciting. And
Yeah, something very
finally,
different.
I know. And then I'm starting a course on coding
Oh, cool.
very
Yeah,
soon. So
that'd be
so
really
who
interesting.
knows? I know where the future will take me, but that's where I'm at the moment.
Brilliant. That sounds like lots of plate spinning, but all good ones. So
Yes, yes. New
fantastic.
plate spinning now.
Yeah, new plate spinning. Try not to do your metacognitive strategies at the same time. Don't give yourself an overload. Well, thank you, Omar. It's been amazing talking to you. The last thing really is just what is the best way for our readers or listeners to get in touch with you?
So you can get in touch with me through Twitter at Anwar_A. I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. Um, yes. So through any of those channels, you can get in touch with me.
Brilliant. All right. Well, thank you, Amora. And then obviously, when your new website is ready, I'm sure you'll be sharing that as well. And that'll be another great way for people to contact you.
I will be, yes, definitely.
All
Thank you
right.
for having me.
Yeah, no, thank you for joining.